So she's essentially a genetic warrior who exists and lives only to kill and to protect her master. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Everest M. Bradley, author of Inhuman. Wow, that's so exciting to say. Okay, and we are going to be doing a review today. If you have been wondering where I've been, I have been publishing books. I know, that sounds like totally authorish, but it actually does take a lot of time. I spent probably like 5 hours every single day publishing books. And on top of that, I also have to do school because I'm a full-time student. So I just did not have any time to stream. But since I've gotten that done, I gave myself a little bit of a break. I'm now back, and today we're going to be talking about The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. Also, if you can hear that in the background, that is a windstorm that we have going on right now. I've tried to wait, hoping it would pass, but it just hasn't. There's nothing that I can do about it. It's been going on for days now, and it looks like it's going to be continuing on for more days. So I'm sorry, I can't control the weather. But yeah, let's just get into the review. So if you have seen a review from me before, you should know that there are 3 rules that I have when reviewing content. First, I like to go in blind. I don't think that I need to know the author's backstory to be able to offer a good review. Second, I have a 1 to 10 rule, meaning that I usually expect content to come in at about a 5 out of 10, that there's something good or something bad about it. I expect it to be kind of like right in the middle. But 10 out of 10 is like perfect. 1 out of 10 is like, this just was an absolute train wreck. And then lastly, I have my 60% DNF rule. I do this simply because I don't want to torture myself with trying to read through an entire book if I'm really not loving it. But I also want to make sure that I understand the book and that like I'm getting a full grasp of that book. So 60% is usually where I call a DNF if I am going to do that. But today, I'm going to be reviewing The Diabolic, and this is actually going to be a little bit of a different review. So normally, in the past, when I review books, I review one book and I go into all the depth about the plot, everything that you could possibly need to know about the book. But today is going to be a little bit different because I'm actually reviewing not only The Diabolic, the first book, but I'm also going to be reviewing The Empress, the sequel. It's a trilogy, so it's a book number 2 is what I'm trying to say. So it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be more of a compare and contrast. And as I get into the books themselves, you'll start to understand why I'm doing a compare and contrast method rather than just reviewing the books. Also, I want to note that I'm not going to be able to go through the whole plot for both books. There are so many things that happen in each book that I would literally spend an hour just trying to tell you the plot of the book because there's a lot that happens. So I'm just going to summarize the plot as neatly as I can. I'm going to skip over a lot of little points. For example, there's a character named Gladdock in the book series. I'm not even going to talk about him. He's such a minor character. I'm going to refer mostly to the main characters and the main plot points. So I'm sorry if you guys really want like a fully in-depth review, but I don't want to be here for 3 hours talking about these 2 books. So let's start with The Diabolic. The plot of Diabolic goes as so. It is a YA sci-fi novel that revolves around a girl called Nemesis, who's not actually like a girl. She's a machine or a biological weapon created to assassinate people in the name of her master. So she's essentially a genetic warrior who exists and lives only to kill and to protect her master. And in the book series, these creatures, like Nemesises, are called Diabolics. And they were created to serve this purpose, but shortly after they realized that Diabolics actually can really murder a lot of people, and there's no way to stop them because they have like the strength of 4 men, and they're not only really, really strong, but they're also really, really skilled in killing people. So they basically banned Diabolics, outlawed all of them. You could not get any of them. And Nemesis only escaped punishment of this law by her master, Sidonia, faking her death. So that's where the series starts off. You quickly learn that the whole purpose of Nemesis's existence is to serve Sidonia, but Sidonia really disagrees with this idea. She thinks that Nemesis is in fact a person, and she wants Nemesis to respect herself as a living being and as a living entity. So that's where this all starts off. The plot then goes as so. So Sidonia is they call them an Empyrean, because there's a whole class system. I don't want to sit here and break down the class system, but basically she's a part of a noble class, and her whole existence is that she is going to serve as a potential senator for this galaxy, ruling this galaxy one day. Nemesis one day accidentally steps into this meeting, and she's kind of like learning about the enemies that Sidonia makes and Sidonia has, and that's when she meets Tyrus, who is going to be the main love interest, just putting that out there. Tyrus is the mad Joker. He's supposed to be the next emperor, but everybody just thinks he's crazy. And there's like this really awkward moment where, since they're all interacting basically online through avatars, Tyrus, I don't know how to say his name. Tyrus's avatar is completely in the nude, and Nemesis is like, well, yeah, he's definitely a madman if he's showing up to what is supposed to be a very formal online gathering, and his entire avatar is naked. So that's kind of where you can kind of see how this is gonna go, because this entire plot then revolves around Nemesis, who then becomes Sidonia and takes her spot. And this is further accentuated by the fact that the Emperor feels threatened by Sidonia's father, because Sidonia's father wants to give scientific technology to outlying colonies and planets and have a total renaissance, a scientific renaissance. So Sidonia gets called to go to what is known as the Chrysanthemum, which is basically like the palace, and she knows that she's probably not going to survive if she goes there, because people like her get assassinated all the time. So Nemesis is like, I will go in your place, don't worry about it. Like, I've already been seeing you do this. I've already been on your meeting. Like, I've got this. So Nemesis goes in Sidonia's place, and they've disguised her as a Diabolic. So she no longer looks like a Diabolic. She looks like Sidonia, just a little bit taller, in slightly different hair color. And they can change all their hair colors and facial colors and stuff like that, I should mention. That's actually a really cool part of this book, by the way. So she goes into the Chrysanthemum, and she quickly learns that court life is not as easy as it seems. People really are out to get her and really hurt her in the name of Sidonia, hurt Sidonia. They don't know that she's a Diabolic, because otherwise they wouldn't even try. But yeah, they're out there to like literally try to ruin her. And one of these moments that comes to like a peak is when Nemesis has to essentially choose sides. So she's given the chance to choose sides with this girl named Elantra, who is her supposed enemy, or she's given this chance to choose Navani. They're all sci-fi names, like don't expect me to pronounce these correctly, just warning you. So she's given chances to choose sides. Elantra is her potential enemy, but she's really high ranked and she has a lot of power, whereas Navani is essentially an Earth girl. Like, she comes off of a planet. She is not even supposed to be there because her mother's an elected official, right? So she's not even really royalty in any sense, and she's very low on the totem pole. And on top of that, because her mother's the one who is doing all this stuff, she's an elected official, she's way under the spotlight a lot more, meaning that it's potentially way more dangerous for Nemesis to associate with Navani. However, due to some circumstances that come up and the fact that Elantra basically sold Nemesis out to some creeps who were abusing the different children of the Chrysanthemum, she's like, all right, I'm going to choose Naveni. Naveni is cool. She is not going to try to murder me in my sleep, whereas I feel like Elantra would. So she and Naveni become best friends, and it is through their friendship that Nemesis is able to survive at court. So they have a lot of moments together where they're bantering back and forth and so on and so forth. But the big moment comes down to when they're going to these animal dog fight rings. It is very common in this court for animals to fight each other to the death, and that is considered entertainment there. And as Nemesis is going through this and she's trying to participate in this event, she physically can't bring herself to do it because it reminds her of her time when she was essentially kind of like a dog, right? When she was being trained to kill, when she was constantly fighting to live. And so she has such a visceral like PTSD reaction from this that she actually jumps in the ring to try to stop the fight. However, this is one of those moments where actually, like, looking back on it, it was kind of, if you know anything about training animals, this is one of those things where you're just like, okay, what? Because when she jumps in the fight to stop the fight, that she has to face off with this creature who is literally a giant dog bear. And she decides that the way that she's going to do this is she's going to cut her dress into strips, wrap it around her arm, so that way it's kind of like a brace, and then proceed to bash the animal over the head with the rock until it's unconscious. But if you know anything about training animals, that's a German Shepherd can nearly rip your arm off by itself, and it's a German Shepherd. Like, it's not a huge thing. This is a dog bear, like, it's massive. So this was one of those moments where I was like, I don't really feel like they know about animal training, but putting that aside, it is also at this moment that Tyrus, the mad, what is the terminology for this? Because he's the Emperor 2B, but he's like Successor Primus, I guess. He realizes Nemesis's potential, and he's like, fine, you can have the creature, like, thank you for showing us the wrongs of our ways. And like, he's making a huge dramatic scene out of this. But because of this, people start to see Nemesis as a moral compass. They want to side with her, thinking that, you know, okay, she's clearly going to cause some change here. And as a result, Nemesis basically has to go back into hiding again because she's like, I can't be drawing attention to myself. That's the wrong thing to do. Like, I can't do that. But ultimately, it didn't even matter because the Emperor, I can speak English, guys. The Emperor decides that he is going to assassinate all of his potential enemies, which means Navani's mother, Nemesis's family, Sidonia, everyone. So like, he literally just blows up everyone and kills them all. And Nemesis, being a guardian, literally being made to protect someone, like, frankly loses it. She's like, I came here to protect Sidonia, and by coming here, I condemned her to death. And she just, like, she has a moment. She straight up, like, she just tries to kill the Emperor, and just goes for it, but is stopped because the Emperor has Diabolics because he gets to escape his law and rule. But yeah, so like, she literally goes on a suicide mission just to end everyone and everything. And it is only because Tyrus at the time happened to be there that Nemesis is actually saved. Tyrus helps kill the Diabolic and saves Nemesis's life. This is like a whole awkward scene, by the way, because when I was reading this, it was very difficult to imagine what was fighting, what fight was going on, because I felt like it was happening so fast that I couldn't really get my mind around it. But basically, Tyrus saves Nemesis and kills the other Diabolic. And that's when Tyrus realizes, oh, that's not actually Sidonia. That's a Diabolic. Like, there's no way that this girl could even have a single chance of defeating this Diabolic unless she herself was a Diabolic. And that's when he comes up with this plan. He is going to use Nemesis to kill the Emperor and take the Emperor's throne. And it turns out no surprise, he's not actually a madman at all. In fact, he's been faking his madness this whole time in order to survive, because his uncle, the Emperor, literally just kills everyone who is a threat to him and his throne. So the only reason why he survived is because he looks like a complete lunatic and nobody actually takes him seriously. But because he now has Nemesis, he is like, oh my gosh, I can totally change this. Everything can go into plan. But of course, Nemesis is like, I don't care. The one person that I was born to protect just died. Why should I help you? And it's at this point that Tyrus kind of like gets into her and like, it's like he manages to hit that same level that Sidonia did, like in Nemesis' mind, where he's like, you realize you are a person. You're not just a machine made to act under order. And that's when Nemesis starts to think of Sidonia, and it kind of like clicks for her. She's like, you want to know what? You're right. Sidonia believed in me as a person, and she knew that I could have an impact on other people. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to help this guy take over the entire throne and the entire galaxy, really. And I'm going to help him make sure that nothing like this ever happened again, and that I can get my revenge on the Emperor for killing Sidonia. So they kind of reach this mutual pact, and they're like, okay, this is good. We're going to do this. We're going to kill the Emperor. And to do this, Tyrus naturally starts having to throw off his whole I'm crazy or whatever exterior. And he does this by pretending that he's so in love with Nemesis that like he literally cannot help himself. He just loves her so much that it makes him sane again. And surprisingly, like this works out actually. Like, I know it sounds weird saying it out loud, but the detail that went into this transition was actually very smooth. So, of course, the Emperor is like, oh my gosh, like finally my nephew's coming around, and he's not as insane as he once was. And on top of that, he picked a really fragile, weak girl who I can control, because that's what he thinks Sidonia is. And he's like, this is all just working out for me. That is until Nemesis and Tyrus finally begin to unleash their plan, and everyone starts to turn against the Emperor. So there's like little moments here where it's like, instead of being a raging jerk, Tyrus proves himself to be very kind and compassionate, and instead of being dumb, Tyrus shows that he's very intelligent and very wise. And it kind of, there's like this whole scene where he shows the court that he's not actually as horrible as his uncle, and that's his entire goal, to change people in the court and to change their minds about him and make him believe that he should really be the Emperor. But because of this, the Emperor is like, I can't do this. I'm going to try to assassinate you. Like, you can't take my throne. And as a result, that forces Tyrus and Nemesis to get involved with Tyrus's grandmother to look for protection. And Tyrus's grandmother is actually the one who's controlling the entire empire. She controlled the previous emperor. She controls this emperor. It is through her grace that anyone is really able to rule in this empire, because she is the snake in the henhouse. Like, she's the one who decides who's going to die, who's going to live. The only reason why she actually protects Tyrus is because the Emperor is starting to act on his own, and he forgets entirely that it's his grandmother who put him on the throne. So as a result, Tyrus and Nemesis come together, and they're like, we're going to try to kill the Emperor. We want your support. We think that, he's losing it, and that he's not, like, you're not going to be able to control him. And his grandmother's like, yes. You want to know it? I believe in you. In fact, I like this. Let's do this. We're going to assassinate the Emperor. And lo and behold, that doesn't actually happen the way that Tyrus, I seriously don't know his name. It's Tyrus. Take that as you want. But, so this doesn't actually happen the way that it turns out to be. In fact, the grandmother tries to use Nemesis both against the Emperor and Tyrus, and as a result, the emperor dies, and Tyrus is entirely heartbroken because he actually was falling in love with Nemesis this whole time. And Nemesis at the same time is like, I thought you were the one that was going to like doing all this. I thought you were betraying me. It's a mess. But needless to say, it comes down to the point where it's obvious that Nemesis is diabolic. It's been made known to the entire court. She's helped assassinate the emperor, like she's the one to blame. And now Tyrus is going to become the puppet head under his grandmother's rule. So the book ends with his grandmother essentially being outed to the entire court that in fact she was the one controlling everything, and she was the one who orchestrated a bunch of murders that led to this point, and she gets sent off into space. Literally launched into a star. And meanwhile, Tyrus hijacks the entire empire. He manages to convince enough people to be on his side that he's able to gain support to be a ruler. So that's where book 1 ends. I left a ton of stuff out, but that is where book 1 ends. Book 2 picks up immediately right after. And this is, I'm just gonna say it, I don't know what happened to book 2, because book 1, despite having some flaws, it was very well put together and it felt very linear and cohesive. And then going from book 1 into book 2, it felt like all that stuff that we were working towards in book 1, even though like it picks up right after, kind of just went out the window. So for example, Nemesis and Tyrus were officially going to be together. Nemesis was realizing that all the time that she had been with him, those were feelings of love, and then she was actually becoming like a real person capable of processing and her own emotions and feeling things. But from there onto book 2, it's like all of that work goes right out the window because Nemesis is now just making decisions for Tyrus. She decides that she's going to assassinate his living family members, like the last 2 living family members, because they're a threat to him, without ever talking to him. And she's just making all these decisions for him. And it's very much like we just spent all this time developing a healthy relationship where Tyrus shows Nemesis that she's a human being and that she deserves love and respect, and then we just jump straight into this. So anyway, that's the starting off point. Nemesis tries to assassinate a bunch of people, and surprisingly, the assassinations actually fail because the wrong people drink the poison and everything kind of just crumbles. However, at the same time, Tyrus is also holding a secret back from Nemesis, and that is that he actually is struggling to be an emperor because he's supposed to be able to control all these spaceships in this galaxy. That is his one divine goal, but he can't actually control any of them, and he doesn't understand why, and he doesn't know how to fix it. And so it becomes clear through talking to people who actually know stuff and who are actually guiding the emperor that he needs the support of people who are called Vicars, and in order to get the support, he is going to have to give up Nemesis as a love interest because they don't see her as being human. So unless if he gives up Nemesis, he cannot become an emperor, and he cannot control his galaxy and all these spaceships and everything that goes on within the galaxy unless he does this. And of course, Tyrus, being the lover boy, the sweet, amazing person that he is like, no, I will figure out a different way to do this without giving up Nemesis. Like, you guys just don't see it. She is a person. She deserves respect. She is not a thing. So he decides he's going to try to, while defending his spot on the throne, he's going to try to find the origin of the power behind the Vicars, and he's going to try to go straight to the head and be like, look, you need to tell these people that Nemesis is actually a person and that she needs to be respected and that she's going to be the empress, and so that way I can do my thing as an emperor and I can continue on to this throne. And so you have basically 2 plots kind of running side by side. You have all of the drama that is happening in the court where they're trying to adjust to the fact that Tyrus is now the new emperor, And then you also have this whole like romance plot that's also happening, where Tyrus is trying to find a way for him and Nemesis to be together. And that is kind of where I left off at the 60% point. The exact point, I guess like the last biggest plot point that happens is they do in fact find the head of these Vicars. It's like a religion. They find the head of this. They manage to convince him that he was wrong about having this mandate and that Nemesis was in fact a person. And they're going back to the Empire after being gone for like several months. And they're ready to essentially rebuild and renew everything when they get ambushed. And that's the last thing that was like really, really big and that happened. That was around my DNF point. I still don't know if I'm actually going to finish these books because on one hand, the first book was amazing. The second book is not. And that's actually why we're going to be doing a comparison today, because I gave the first book an 8 out of 10. I was so impressed with how well it was, especially for being a YA sci-fi, which is a genre that you don't typically see. But I ended up giving the second book a 3 out of 10 because, ouch. Like, I don't know where it went wrong, but there was a lot of stuff that went wrong. So, aside from like some awkward scenes, like I mentioned with the whole bear dog where she's jumping into the ring, the first book actually did really, really well. It built a very solid, healthy relationship. Probably one of the best romantic relationships that I've seen in a YA in a very long time. Like, I was actually really moved and felt really emotional, I guess I should say, about how, Nemesis was beginning to identify as a person and how she was starting to overcome some of that trauma that she had experienced as a child. Like, that was really good. There were so many very subtle themes that were given a lot of time and attention and love. And on top of that, the plot itself was actually pretty good. Like, a lot of YAs really struggle with political intrigue and how courts and government actually work. But I found that I believed that the Diabolic, the book, like the whole universe, is something that sounds real. It sounds like it could be applicable. So I was never at any given point being like, oh my gosh, this is so dumb, or like, I hate this. Like, no, I was genuinely enjoying a lot of the political intrigue that was going on in book one. I think the biggest problem for book one was its pacing. There's so much that happens. Like, even me just describing that plot, that's only about half of the plot. So I feel like it should have been divided into at least 2 books or given way much more time, because the book itself is 400 pages long, and I feel like you honestly would have needed to double that in order to have like a really, really well developed atmosphere, setting, everything. Because in the book series, it just feels really skin and bones. Like, it feels so thin and not really developed as well as it could have been. And on top of that, like, Naveni was such an important character at the beginning that I feel like it should have been more important. Because I feel like a lot of the things that make her a character were kind of skipped over once we got to the Tyrus part, because then it was just Nemesis and Tyrus, Nemesis and Tyrus, Nemesis and Tyrus. And I like that, but I also wanted other characters to stand out more, if that makes sense. And I feel like it would have been better to probably develop the Emperor a little bit more, because he was very much a mustache twirling villain. Granted, he was not the actual villain. That was the grandmother. But like, he was very much like, I'm just gonna sit here and be evil and greedy because I can be evil and greedy. Like, so there's some little things in there that I feel like if we had just pushed it a little bit further, it could have been a pretty much almost perfect book. Very, very good, 8 out of 10. That being said, everything that was good in book 1 kind of vanished in book 2. And everything that was bad in book 1 doubles in book 2. So I honestly don't know what happened. Here's the thing, that when I'm reading a book series and I see one book do really, really, really well, and then the next book totally flop, it makes me wonder what happened. Because, you just read a really good book, so you know that the author can write. So what happened that made it so that book 2 was not as good as book 1? Um, as I was reading, I was like, was it because book 1 did so well that the publishing house asked her to write another book when she didn't have any intention to write another book? What did the publishing house not give her enough time to write book 2? Did they switch editing teams, so her previous editor, who did really, really well, was substituted for one who just wasn't as good? Like, there's so many potential ways that this went wrong. I just had no idea. But so the pacing in book 2 was just, oh my gosh. I thought it was fast in book 1. In book 2, everything, like, it feels like every 2 pages there's a new thing going on. Like, I felt like I was getting whiplash because I could not keep up with how fast the pacing was. And on top of that, like I said before, with Nemesis poisoning Tyrus's relatives, it felt like all of the things that we'd worked toward for their relationship were back at ground zero. And all of that trust and that love, like, Tyrus was still doing a good job. He's a good boy. But Nemesis, like, I was like, girl, you just spent 400 pages falling in love with this man. And you mean to tell me that, like, you don't trust him at all? Like, you're just gonna act on his behalf? Like, what are you doing? That was very frustrating. But on top of that, there were, like, the entire book felt so disconnected. It felt like somebody had gone in and they had ideas for cute scenes or something that they had wanted to write, but they had no idea how to connect any of them. So it felt more like a combination of short stories and ideas than it did like an actual narrative. One of the most important parts of this was, like, Nemesis gets personhood in book 2, like literal personhood. It is given to her religiously as she's granted personhood. But you never really see, like, in book 1, it would be very easy to believe, oh, she's actually working toward that. Like, that's her goal this entire time. But in book 2, that doesn't even, like, really cross her mind until, like, when it actually happens. She's not sitting there thinking, oh, this would be so much easier if I was a person. Oh, this would be, like, she doesn't have that internal anguish that you need to be able to believe something like that happening. And there was another moment where it's like Tyrus had to retaliate for something that was happening in court, because people were starting to betray him. And the quickest way to retaliate would have been to kill someone. And so it was supposed to be Nemesis' job to do this, because she knew that Tyrus wouldn't be able to do it because he's too soft and too emotional. So she goes to kill this person, and literally there's like one whole page of her having this moment, I guess you could say, where she's like, you want to know what? This isn't how an empress would react. This isn't how I should react. I want to be a better empress. Like, I'm going to release this guy. And so she lets the guy go. And it's like, okay, that's great. That's what I want to read. But how does this connect to anything that we were just reading about pages ago when you were literally just trying to assassinate these other people? I was like, I mean, I guess. Sure, why not? Like, I honestly don't know where it went wrong. Everything kind of just poofed. So, yeah, that is my review of the Diabolic series. I'm still on the fence about whether I'm going to actually finish book 2, because on one hand, it's a train wreck, but on the other hand, it's the kind of train wreck that you don't want to look away from. So if I do actually finish book 2, I will come back in the comments and I'll be like, okay, here's an update. Like, here's everything that went on. But otherwise, I'm going to leave this here because, honestly, yeah, that was an interesting series. I really, really loved book 1, and I would recommend that everyone read it because it is good YA sci-fi, and it has such good characters. But honestly, I'm not sure if I'd recommend reading the rest of the series. I'd probably just keep it as a standalone. So yeah, otherwise I'm gonna leave that here. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out the links in my profile. As I said earlier, I just released volume 2 to my series, so that has been awesome. I've been super excited about that. But otherwise, yes, this is going to be the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Bye, guys.